So today we're going to look at network communication using sockets, and we're going to look at the client-server model of communicating. Odds are you've used some programs that already use kind of the client-server model. So if you've connected to a web server, if you've looked at a web page, your web browser client has connected to a web server that serves the web page. If you've played Minecraft or other games and connected to the game server, it's serving your client, your game information. Messenger apps like BBM and WhatsApp, you send your message to a server, it sends it to the appropriate client. Um, the easiest analogy to make when we talk about client and server communication is kind of ordering a pizza. So, if I wanted to order a pizza, um, I'm the client, am going to call a business, the server, and ask them to serve me a pizza. And we're going to have to exchange some information, and I'm going to have to know some information beforehand. So that's what we're going to look at today. So that's kind of a brief rundown of what client-server communication looks like. I'm going to do it a little different. I've already got the code up, and we're just going to walk through this, and I'm going to post this on the e-learning site. It's well commented, so you can kind of follow along, manipulate it to try and meet your own needs. So I've got a client and server that we're going to look at. Now, um, the server, just like a business, just sits there waiting for somebody to call and ask for business. So our server needs to run first, right? If I start my client first and the server, the store isn't open, nothing's going to happen. So I need my server to start first. So we're going to look at the server first. And you notice I just print out a message saying starting server, system.out.println, inet address.getLocalhost. So if I run my server right now, first thing that pops up is this inet address, which is basically the IP of my server. So remember I said we're going to need some information to be able to communicate back and forth. If I'm sitting here and I want to order a pizza, I can't just call out into the air, I need a pizza, and magically a business will deliver a pizza to me. I need to know information about the business. I need to know how to contact them. And this IP address is how I know how to contact my server, the company that I want something from. So before you do anything with your server, you need an IP, and this is how you're going to communicate between each other. Now, the other thing you're going to do, you'll notice this actually starts the server socket. Sockets are like little tubes of that we send information to and from two different computers. So server socket is a special type of socket that's going to accept a connection from an outside source. And in our client, you'll see that we're going to just create a new socket and attempt to connect to our server. So two things that the client will eventually need. They'll need to know my IP, and they'll also need to know a port. So easiest analogy for a port, let's say I live in a apartment building and I say, here's my address, bring me my pizza. Well, what apartment number am I? That's the port. And different programs use different ports. And if you question still why does your computer need to know the port, how does our computer know not to connect, let's say, a BitTorrent client to our web browser, right? Those are two clients that were you probably running on our computer and that are getting information. How does it know which direction to route the data into? So ports are just a number to help make sure connections go to the right programs. You'll notice today our program is going to use port 4444. If you look it up on the web, different programs use different ports. There's some standards. If you use a web browser, it always uses port 80. If you've ever used FTP, it uses port 20 and 21. I'm not sure on what BitTorrent. BitTorrent has a whole range of ports that they use because you're doing multiple connections to, you're acting as a client and a server. But you can look that up. Now, the other thing I'm going to post on the e-learning site is this file, but let's talk about this right now. So client-server model, server waits for the connection, which we've already talked about. So it's like the pizza business just sitting there waiting for somebody to order a pizza. Client attempts a connection. The client needs to know the IP, the phone number of the business. Some servers can accept multiple connections from clients. These clients can be held in a vector and array list. Eventually, when we get to the project, dealing with clients and servers, we'll have to put that in a vector. But for right now, our simple server and client that I'm going to post for you today just accepts one connection. You can take a look at my server. Notice I create a server socket, and I have one socket that's going to accept the client socket. And in theory, server socket can accept multiple. So I could have, if I wanted 2 clients, I could say client 2 socket and try and accept a connection for that one. But we're not going to do that today. But you will probably end up doing that for your next project. So, most computers run server programs and client programs. So again, if you think about BitTorrent, if you're using BitTorrent or a file share program like that, you're trying to get a file from somewhere, so you're acting as a client and connecting to another server, and then you're also sharing parts of the file, so other computers are connecting to you. So client must know the server's IP, server sits and waits for a connection. Now, we talked about ports, servers run on computers have many ports. I think we've pretty much covered all this. Okay, so you need to know the IP and the port. Now, one thing I should mention, blocking. When a program sends, connects, listens, or waits for a connection, it blocks, which means nothing else happens in our program until the action is done. In fact, if I go back to my program, you might think my program is frozen right now because it's not doing anything. It's stopped right there. It looks like it's frozen. In fact, if I'd done this in a GUI, I wouldn't be able to click buttons right now. I wouldn't be able to move it around. It would look like the program crashed. And when in reality, it hasn't crashed. It's just sitting there waiting for a client to connect. So that's what blocking means. So eventually, when we start doing some more advanced programs with network capability, we're going to have to run it in a separate thread so our program doesn't freeze. Now, ready to start. So you see, we've created our server socket, port 444. It's sitting here. It's blocked at this point. It's waiting for the client to connect. So I'm going to go over to the client side, and I'm ready. Now, special word, if you want to connect to a program on your own computer, you would say localhost. Usually I would put the IP of the other computer that I want to connect to, but I'm just going to say localhost, and I'm going to run my program. So here's what the messages run, and then you'll notice, again, I'm going to give you time to kind of read over the code on your own, but we have a print writer and a buffered reader. It's kind of like, it's very similar to reading and writing from a file, which we did earlier in the year. So notice I said connected. As soon as I'm successfully connected, the client trying to connected to localhost 127.0.0.1, which again is the IP of the localhost. You could just say localhost or 127.0.0.1, and I got a message from my server. Hello, welcome to my server. You notice from server it says read line. So what I've read, and this is important, we need to decide a protocol on how communication is going to happen between our client and the server. Now, our expected form of communication, if you don't have a protocol, you can have a lot of misinformation. Now, if my client expected to say the first thing and I sent out a message, all the communication would be off, kind of off, and our program wouldn't work correctly. So a client and server need to have a strict protocol on how they're going to communicate, who's going to talk first, and what information needs to be communicated and how. So you'll notice my protocol for this one is the server talks first, which if we look back, as soon as we're connected, we create the input and output stream, right, just like we would for a file, and we say, hello, welcome to my server. So the client got that message, hello, welcome to my server. And then what the client does is says, hi, nice server, I have to go though, bye. Now let's look at our server. Client trying to connect, that was the message I posted, connected to localhost 127 from server, hello, welcome to my, oh, sorry, wrong one. From client, hi, nice server, I have to go, bye, quitting. And you notice now both programs have successfully finished and they're done. We've quit. So the client said, printed one message from the server, and the server printed one message from the client. Very simple communication. Again, I'm going to post both these files on the e-learning site so you can read over, and I've got them very well commented, so you know what's going on. So I encourage you to play around with these. Now, one thing I'll point out, eventually what we're going to do is we're going to do some more advanced programs with this. So we can either do a network drawing project, or we might do a paper, rock, scissors game over the network, or eventually you might do Pong or some sort of game using sockets. We need to know what parsing means. So what parsing means is we just send plain text over our network communication. We need to be able to parse. That means read through and decode what this information means. And again, that comes back to protocol. We need to have a set way that we're going to talk about it. So if this was a hypothetical network drawing program, that communication from the client might be saying to the server, I want to draw mode using the pen, I want to set the color to this, and I want to set some properties about my pen. So a lot of what you end up doing with client-server communication when you're coding this is setting up the protocol on how these programs are going to talk and what information is communicated in what form.